Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here for videocopilot.net, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at creating a cool explosion on this city building. So here's what we're going to be creating. So pretty cool. We have this fire coming out. We have this lighting in our scene, glass pieces falling on the ground, and smoke. So we're going to recreate this using a bunch of elements from Action Essentials 2. So first thing we're going to do is come down, take our city footage, drop it into a new comp, and we're going to go and get started. I've imported some select clips from the Action Essentials 2 collection, and I'm going to go down to this fireball side number 6, and we're going to bring that out. And I'm using the 720p version here, and it's just a regular fireball shooting off from one side. We're going to flip it, and then we're going to scale it down and fit it right into this area. Now, one of the main things we're going to be using throughout this tutorial is a matte, an obscure matte. So we're going to create a new solid, and we'll call it matte, make comp size, and choose OK. We'll go and shut the eye off. We're going to take the pen tool, and we can shut the eye off on that fire too. Now we want the fire to come out of this area right underneath this parking garage. So we're going to draw a shape right around this, high enough so that our fire won't get cut off. And then we can turn our fireball back on. And if we toggle our switches, we'll see the track matte, and we'll set it to alpha inverted. So now our fire gets obscured and will look a little bit more like it's coming from underneath this area. So scale it down even more here. Check it out. So this is the main idea. I've rotated it here and just moved it right into this area. Now, an explosion starts out quickly and then sort of slows down. So this is a fireball, and we want to go ahead and add that dynamic. So with the layer selected, I'm going to choose Layer, Time, Enable Time Remapping. And I'm going to set a keyframe right at the point where the fireball kind of is a complete circle or so. And then what I'm going to do is take our first keyframe and just move it over. So then we have all that animation happening in a very short amount of time, and then it slowly burns off. Maybe even scale this up just a bit, move it over. Now the other thing I may want to add to our little obscure matte is there appears to be a little bit of a light post. So let's just add that in real quick. Shut that off, turn our fire back on, and move that to the ground even. So now we just have a little bit of something in front of our fire, which is kind of a cool effect. Gives us a little bit of depth as to where that fire is actually coming from. Now, this is the first part of many layers that we're going to incorporate. The other layer is going to be some debris that's going to fall onto the street. So we'll go ahead, come up here to the debris. We have bouncing debris, double click on that, and it's basically some 3D rendering of some particles bouncing and hitting the ground. Now, 3D rendering was a more practical way to get this effect with transparency and everything. It's not necessarily to be meant as an effect on its own. Obviously, it just sort of falls. But when used with live action elements, it's incredible what it does. It creates depth by allowing your subject or your effects footage to actually look like it's on the surface of your footage. And sometimes, you know, stock footage can look very fake because it doesn't really have a reference point as to being grounded. It just looks like clip art stuck on top of, your composite. So these are great elements for that specific reason. So we'll scale this down some. And I've rotated it here slightly and put it on the street. Now, obviously, we need to time this, so we'll move it over, back it up, Now we also want to add a matte to this as well. We're going to use the same matte, except we need to duplicate it, put it above the bouncing debris, and set it to alpha inverted so that that debris is going to be right there. Now the other thing we can do is basically shut it off so that we don't see the debris until it's being flung out. And you can do that a couple of ways. We could set a quick keyframe and, back it up so that we don't quite see it, and then it sort of flings onto the surface. You could fade it in. There's a couple of different ways that you could achieve this, but the idea is to simply make it so that it blends with the entire shot. Now I've also had this glass element, fallen glass number 8, which works very similarly. And you can take this element and lay it onto the shot and create, some multiple surfaces breaking up, but I'll go ahead and skip that step for now, but it works pretty much the same as the bouncing debris. Now, one of the most important and one of my favorite elements is the dust element. So here we have dust wave number 7, and it's a perfect little dust element that shoots out and kind of dissipates. So we're going to take that element and we're going to put it below the fire, but above the bouncing debris, and we'll scale it down here. And I'll go ahead and solo it. We can take a look. So it sort of gets cut off at the end of the frame, just a little bit. And we need to feather that. So we'll take the rectangle tool here, and we'll just select the end of the clip, set it to subtract, and then feather it. And that way we won't actually see a harsh edge, but rather just a little bit of fading out. And then we're also going to take the pen tool and make a little bit of a mask around the very bottom edge. And this is going to do the same thing. We don't want that harsh edge. We want it to blend with the street. So we'll subtract it, and again, we'll feather it a bit. And not too much, because we want to have sort of a hard edge. And then we'll unsolo it, scale it down some more. We can hide the masks just for a moment. And we'll rotate it also. Now, we need to take this and line it up. So we'll move it over a bit. And look at that, it just kind of shoots right out. We can also add a matte to it as well. Just duplicate it, alpha inverted, so that it looks like it's coming from behind that stuff, just like the other clips. We can even move it back there more. Now, the other thing we can do is color correct it, and we should do this with all of our elements. So I'm going to choose color correction, curves, and maybe, add a tint effect as well. That allows to blend it. The other thing you can do is go to the alpha channel and turn that up a bit, and that'll boost the alpha of the element. Now, I don't want to do it too much, but it's a good way to just give your clip a little bit more life, a little bit more depth. Bam. So that explosion is so fast, and it just blows the dust off of the surface, and very cool. We might even take that fireball and scale it up just a little bit more. Now we might also want to add a little bit of a mask to the fire just at the bottom here, and set that to subtract and feather it a little bit, just so that we don't have any kind of hard edges. We really want this to blend with everything that's happening here. And also our debris element looks a little dark, so we can take that element and maybe add some color correction. Just kind of try to match the contrast. Give it maybe a little bit of cooler color there. Yeah. So that looks pretty good. Okay. Now, the other thing we need to do is add like a nice glow effect. And we're going to do that by creating a new adjustment layer. And then we're going to take the ellipse tool, and we're going to draw a circle right around the fire. And we're going to add stylize glow. And move this up just a bit. We're going to change the glow color to AB color. And that way we can set our own color here. We'll set it to like orange and red. Then we can turn the radius up, maybe the radius of our little box, and also feather out our mask so that it really blends. And we can go right here, turn up the intensity, really create, this cool effect. Now, the thing about this glow is we want to fade it in. So hit T, bring up the opacity, set the keyframe, move forward here, set it to 0, and it's going to fade in, and then it's going to fade out. We just want it to glow for that really bright, hot spot of the fireball, and then sort of fade out. Now there's a couple other elements that we want to add. We have some fire, and we also have a smoke element. First, we have this large fire element. I'm going to bring that out, and we'll scale it down. And this is just this big fire element. We'll put it right below the fireball. And we'll zoom in here. We'll scale it down so it fits in this window. We'll duplicate another matte, put it above the fire, and again, alpha inverted so that it hides behind all that stuff. And then we'll solo the fire and the background. And we can work on this element by itself. Now the thing about the fire is we need to fade it in, but we don't want to just add, an opacity fade in. Instead, we're going to add a curves alpha fade in. So we go to the alpha channel and set a keyframe, and we move forward or sooner, and we just bring the alpha curve down. And if you look at this, we're sort of darkening the element, but not fading it out. It's more gradual, and that's great for fire because fire, shouldn't just fade in. And then I'm going to trim the clip also. We'll unsolo it, and the idea here is to move the fire so that it comes on while it's covered up by the other big explosion, and that way we won't see what's happening. Now we also want to color correct the element, so we'll add a curves adjustment, and we'll go to the green channel. We can just turn that up, create some nice bright fire there. Now the thing about compositing is you want to have real life references. So you can look for images online or videos on YouTube and look for things that are really happening and use those as a reference for what you're trying to achieve. Is it daylight? Is it nighttime? How is it affecting the surrounding objects, reflections and light, and all that stuff is a great thing to consider when you're doing this type of compositing. So you want to really use a good reference point to get these elements to look more realistic. So this looks pretty good so far. The other element is this big smoke effect. Now, this is a pretty cool effect, but it's just a smoke effect. You might not have thought to use it in this way, but what we're going to do is use it as this big dark smoke plume that kind of goes up after the fireball. So we'll go down here, we'll take the smoke, and we'll let's put it down here above the bouncing debris. We'll duplicate a matte, Control D. We'll put that above the smoke, alpha invert it, and then we'll scale our element, and we'll move it over right behind the fire. Now we're also going to add some time remapping, so we'll enable that. And we're going to go to right about here where that smoke plume gets large enough. We'll rotate the layer here. About right there. We're going to set a keyframe for the time remap. And then we're going to take the first keyframe, move it over. And that's going to create a much quicker start to this smoke plume. And then we're going to move it over so that it lines up with our explosion. And the trick is to cover it up until it emerges at the end here. Now we want it to be black instead of white. So I'll select the clip. I'll choose Effect, Color Correction, Tint, and Effect, Color Correction, Curves. So the tint effect, let's go ahead and make it a dark color. And then we'll go to the alpha channel and we'll boost it so that our smoke is much more thick. And you can see that right there. And finally, this is just a little finishing touch for the elements, we have dust falling. And this is a cool element of just little smoke elements falling down. And what I did was I just took it, brought it out here, scaled it down, And right off of this top ledge, I just had it falling down. So we'll take the pen tool and we'll draw a shape around the part we want to keep. And we'll adjust it so that it looks like maybe it's just coming off of this ledge. And what's cool about this is after this big fireball, you know, we have this light element sort of shake dust off as if this building, you know, is dusty and hasn't been shaken up in a while. So kind of a fun element. And you can get real creative and add several elements all over the place, maybe right inside where the explosion happened, and, you know, just have some fun with it. But that's the idea there. And the other major thing is this reactive lighting. So when we look at this scene, we have all this light going on, and we have this edge that highlights and this top area and these pillars getting lit up. And we want to be able to add that into our shot. So if we go to our scene, we're going to create a new orange solid. And this is going to be our light. And we'll choose OK. And we'll shut it off. And we'll solo our city shot. And we'll zoom in. Make sure that you have that layer selected. Take the pen tool, and we need to start drawing lines around the surfaces that are going to be lit up by this explosion. So one of the first things that we see is this overhang ledge. So I'm going to take the pen tool and draw a shape around that ledge, and be sure to include the balcony here. And you just want to make sure you select the area that's right around where this is going to happen. And we also want to grab these pillars, so we'll draw a selection around them. And we also want to have a nice edge of this balcony kind of cover. And this is going to be a very refined mask. So we'll just make some adjustments here. I mean, this is a very subtle selection, but if you look at the example, you can see it makes a huge difference. And, you know, that's what we're going for. So that looks pretty good. And any other things that you see, go ahead and select them. It's going to really add. So go down here, we'll unsolo the layer, and we'll turn our orange back on. Now we want this to be right above the raw footage. We could solo it. Now I'm going to change the transfer mode to classic color dodge. And we're going to lower the opacity. So that creates a nice light up effect. Okay, this looks pretty good, but I want to add a little bit of light fall off. So I'm going to select the layer, take the ellipse tool, and draw a shape right about where the explosion would be coming from. And then we're going to change that to subtract and invert. So that's adding back in the area. And then we feather that mask and maybe expand it. Expand it right here. So that creates really nice fall off, so that it's not just, you know, sharp edges. It's you know, nice blending and all that. So we want to make sure that we match the opacity of our glow with the opacity of our light. So we can, you know, just line this up. We could link them together, or we could just do it ourselves really quick, fade it in, and then fade it out. So that we've got that. I might even turn it up some. And even offset it some. But you can see that really makes a big difference, especially that little edge around there. And we might even make it a little bit larger so that it stands out, you know, a little bit more. All right, this looks pretty good. And we do have a great tutorial at videocopilot.net for adding some earthquake camera shake, so I won't bore you with that. But you can really see how all these elements together can create some very unique and some very cool effects. So I hope you guys found this tutorial useful. My name is Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time.